A second vaccine with promising results. The drug maker Moderna announces a COVID-19 shot with an effectiveness of 95.5%. The European Union has a crisis on its hands after Hungary and Poland vetoed the bloc's €1.8 trillion budget. A terror trial is underway in Paris. The attackers accused of planning a massacre on a train, but it was famously brought down by a group of American passengers. Hello, everyone. I'm Monty Francis with the latest world news from Paris. Light at the end of the tunnel. That's how experts are describing news that a second coronavirus vaccine is showing success. The drug maker Moderna says its vaccine is 94.5% effective. This follows last week's announcement that Pfizer has also developed a highly effective vaccine. Both companies plan to apply for emergency authorization to begin vaccinating the public, but the shots are not expected to be available to the general public until the spring. And the World Health Organization says it's not time to let up our guard.
There is no excuse for inaction. My message is very clear. Act fast, act now, act decisively. A laissez-faire attitude to the virus, not using the full range of tools available, leads to death, suffering, and hurts livelihoods and economies. It's not a choice between lives or livelihoods. The quickest way to open up economies is to defeat the virus.
Earlier, we spoke to global health expert Gavin Yamey from Duke University, who told us how these two vaccines might eventually bring the pandemic under control.
We are starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, not just with the two vaccines that have preliminary data to suggest high efficacy, but also the fact that we are developing better treatments, the fact that many nations have shown that actually you can control viral transmission through basic public health measures like testing, very widespread testing, rapid testing, tracing those who've been exposed and quarantining them, controlling your borders. So I think with this range of measures, vaccines, treatments, drugs that actually not only treat the disease, but might also prevent transmission in the way that AIDS drugs do, public health measures that we know can work, we've seen those being very successful in Eastern Asian and Pacific Rim nations like Taiwan, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea. That is really now starting to give us hope that this very long nightmare may be coming to an end, though it will not be a switch. It will not be a switch that just gets turned on. This is still, years, I think, ahead of us to get there.
Even though the two vaccines have a similar rate of effectiveness, they are different in some other important ways. As James Vicina explains, one of the shots could be more accessible to remote areas because of how it can be stored.
They claim it's the most effective vaccine against COVID-19 so far. A second glimmer of hope that the battle against the virus could be nearing its end. Moderna says its vaccine is 94.5% effective and hopes to get it out by the end of the year.
The first agreement that we reached with the US government was for an order of 100 million doses. So we anticipate to be able to ship up to 20 million of those 100 million before the end of the year. So we are making product, as you know, every day and stockpiling it. And assuming we get the green light from the FDA, I would say sometime in December, I'm sure General Perna from Operation Warp Speed will be ready with the trucks to load the product and to distribute it in the US via the CDC guidelines.
Of the 30,000 participants in the study, half of them were given a placebo rather than the vaccine. A first analysis found that of 95 participants who'd gone on to contract COVID-19, 90 of them had received the placebo, while only 5 who developed mild symptoms were given the drug. Moderna claims it's particularly effective with more fragile patients and that doses can be stored in a fridge or a freezer for up to 30 days, a step well ahead of rival company Pfizer, whose vaccine proved to be 90% effective but must be kept below 80 degrees Celsius. The lifespan could allow for wider distribution, but some say it's still too early to cheer.
For now, this is a business announcement, not a scientific one. We don't know how long the immunity lasts. The trial has only been going for 2 months.
If approved, the company hopes to ship out 1 billion doses next year. 2 doses taken 2 weeks apart are required for protection against COVID-19.
Cases of the virus continue to surge out of control in the U.S. On Sunday, the nation surpassed 11 million infections, and more than 1,000 people are dying per day. In New York, the mayor has imposed new restrictions on bars and restaurants, and in Chicago, a stay-at-home order has just gone into effect. President-elect Joe Biden said Monday that a lack of cooperation with the Trump White House on a transition means that more people may die.
We all agreed that we want to get the economy back on track. We need our workers to be back on the job by getting the virus under control. We're going into a very dark winter. Things are going to get much tougher before they get easier. And that requires sparing no effort to fight COVID so that we can open our businesses safely, resume our lives, and put this pandemic behind us. It's going to be difficult, but it can be done. That means rallying the country behind a national strategy with robust public health measures, like mandatory masking, widely available testing with rapid results, scaled-up production of life-saving treatments and therapeutics, and safe, equitable, and free distribution of the vaccine.
The European Union has a crisis on its hands after Hungary and Poland vetoed the bloc's 1.8 trillion euro budget. The two countries are objected to linking the money to respect for democratic norms. Laurent Berstecker has the details.
A last-minute veto that could plunge the EU into a fresh political crisis. Hungary and Poland both refused to sign off on the bloc's proposed 7-year budget, citing disagreement over a mechanism which would tie funding to the rule of law.
This has little to do with the rule of law. It's about enslavement and the radical limitation of national sovereignty.
The mechanism would allow the EU to impose financial sanctions on governments that fail to maintain democratic standards. It sparked stiff resistance from Poland and Hungary, two countries that are facing growing criticism over their authoritarian styles of governance, and whose veto now threatens to unravel months of negotiations. The 1.8 trillion euro budget, which includes a 750 billion euro recovery package for COVID-19, was broadly established during a marathon EU summit in July and was agreed upon in principle last week. But failure to get it approved by all 27 member states now means the bloc could enter the new year without any money to spend. The issue is likely to take center stage when EU leaders meet on Thursday to discuss their response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Here in Paris, a suspected terrorist is on trial. He's accused of attempting to carry out a massacre on a train from Paris to Amsterdam in 2015. But a group of American passengers overpowered him. Catherine Norris-Trent has the latest from the courtroom.
The court has been hearing from the main suspect in this foiled terror attack on board a train heading from Amsterdam to Paris in August 2015, a Moroccan national named Ayoub al-Hazani. He's been speaking out. Now, he denied being poised to carry out a mass killing on board that train, despite the fact that he was intercepted carrying a Kalashnikov, a pistol, a box cutter knife, and 270 rounds of ammunition. He maintains that he was seeking only to target American soldiers. He's likely to face very tough questioning over that line of defense, because although he was intercepted and overpowered by a handful of passengers, including 2 off-duty US servicemen, they weren't in uniform. They wore no signs of being US soldiers at all. They were on holiday with a third friend, another American national. But prosecutors will be delving into the links between this foiled train attack and the deadly attacks on Paris in November 2015 that killed 130 people, because the suspected foiled train attacker travelled to Europe from ISIS-controlled territory in Syria, along with the man said to be the so-called mastermind of those November 2015 attacks here in Paris. The two men shared a hideout in Brussels, and prosecutors believe they are very much part of the same terror cell which plotted death and destruction here in Europe.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Turkey in the middle of a 7-nation trip. He spent the weekend in Paris and met with French President Emmanuel Macron. He's now on a tour of several countries in the Middle East. Pompeo's meetings may prove awkward because all of the nations he's visiting have congratulated Joe Biden on winning the presidential election. Pompeo is still backing Donald Trump's false claims of voter fraud, and he said last week there would be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration.
Kicking off his tour of the Middle East following a low-profile Paris visit, Mike Pompeo headed to Istanbul after briefly meeting with Emmanuel Macron behind closed doors on Monday. While in Turkey, the U.S. Secretary of State has no plans to meet with any government officials, a move likely to raise tensions between the two NATO allies. Instead, he's set to meet the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church to discuss issues of religious freedom. After Turkey, Pompeo will make a stop in Georgia before heading to Israel, where he's set to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He also plans to become the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Israeli settlements in the West Bank, which are seen as illegal by the international community. The announcement has already sparked anger among Palestinian authorities, which have denounced a dangerous precedent aimed at legitimizing the settlements. Pompeo will then make stops in the United Arab Emirates, a country which recently normalized relations with Israel, largely thanks to American diplomatic efforts, and in Qatar, which hosts the largest U.S. military base in the region. The Secretary of State will end his tour with a visit to Saudi Arabia, another country that has maintained close ties with the U.S. under the Trump administration.
Now to Peru, where there is worldwide outrage over a violent crackdown on protesters. The UN Secretary General is among those condemning the acts of security forces. At least 2 people have died in the demonstrations, apparently at the hands of police. The country now has its 3rd president this week after former President Martin Vizcarra was impeached, and interim President Manuel Merino stepped down on Sunday, and he was replaced by centrist lawmaker Francisco Sagasti. Hurricane Iota has strengthened to a Category 5 storm as it takes aim at Nicaragua and Honduras. The storm is expected to make landfall along the border between the two countries overnight into this Tuesday. The storm is packing winds of 260 kilometers an hour and is expected to be catastrophic. The same region was slammed by a storm 2 weeks ago that left some 200 people dead or missing.
The previous hurricane destroyed our house and we were left with nothing. Now another one's approaching. We collected some wood to rebuild the house and we don't know what'll happen. We fear for all of our lives. We've nowhere else to go, so here we are again.
We don't want to die. You know, it's been years since we haven't faced these things in Nicaragua. And as precaution, we must do things the way they should be done.
I can't go anywhere because my mom doesn't want to leave, so I'd rather stay here with her.
Now to our special series ahead of Burkina Faso's presidential and legislative elections. Since its last contest in 2015, the country has faced both a security and humanitarian crisis. This Sunday, 6 million people are expected at the polls. Here is part 1 of our series from our reporters on the ground.
At the Joseph Kizebo University in Ouagadougou, the presidential election is all anyone can talk about. Ilbudune Matu is in her first year. She's 18 years old and a first-time voter. She wants the future president to bring security to a country that's been victim to numerous jihadist attacks in recent years.
J'aimerais qu'il soit à l'écoute des jeunes, plus particulièrement les universitaires, ceux de toutes les provinces. L'insécurité aussi peut impacter l'éducation. Par exemple, ceux du Nord, là. Ils n'ont qu'à miser sur la sécurité, former bien les militaires là.
In the business community, others want a fully fledged digital economy.
Nous souhaitons également que les nouvelles autorités puissent travailler sur le renforcement des infrastructures, notamment les infrastructures des technologies de l'information et de la communication. Je pense que cela est extrêmement important pour mobiliser l'épargne, également apporter les services financiers de base, travailler à la bancarisation des populations et permettre le financement inclusif en réalité donc des besoins de l'économie.
At Ouagadougou's big market, insecurity is also a major concern for sellers.
On attend le nouveau président de faire le bon engagement pour la stabilité du pays. Ceux de la province ne viennent plus. À cause de la stabilité du pays, les djihadistes, c'est ça qui fait peur aux paysans.
The November 22nd poll is touted to be the most democratic presidential election since 2014 and the fall of President Blaise Compaoré. He had spent 27 years in power.
That's it for this edition. Stay tuned for more world news here on France 24.